So for this assignment, we're going to do basically our first in-class value drawing. So I'm just recording this just so you can, go back and take a look at it again if you need to. Okay, but again, it's something I went over in class. So you can see the surface here, it's just a white drawing paper, and I toned it in. So, just to give you the quick version, basically I just got a razor blade and chipped some of the charcoal off of a charcoal stick. And then with a chamois or even a paper towel, sometimes the paper towels actually work better. You just kind of blend it around, make little circles. And it gives you this nice little tone. And so if you're wondering why we do that, it's because now you're kind of starting in a middle value, and it actually lets you, as you're drawing, it helps you see the values better. Okay, so we are going to be drawing just a little cube. Okay, it's a pretty simple form, so it's a good one to start with. And so I did put an example of it on right there on Canvas. And again, it's the one that we will, did in class. Okay, so I am just going to draw the cube. And so if you notice what I'm doing is I'm just drawing kind of light, really trying not to push down very hard. Okay. And even up here, since there's going to be light on the back, I'm just going to barely hint at that. My angle's probably off a little bit, but that's okay. Again, as I'm working, that's something that's going to work out just fine. And again, maybe I'll change the angle here, make this a little shorter. Okay, because one of the tricks is that you don't really want edges. So even though I put some lines to help me define where things are, you don't really want those lines showing up in the end, because sort of the trick that we're trying to do here is to try to make something that looks a little bit more realistic. Okay, and so in real life there is not a lot lines and edges on everything, even though we tend to use those to help us get a shape or even a tone in. Okay, so again, we're going to end up using our eraser and charcoal. And so you can see I have a charcoal stick. I might grab a charcoal pencil. I have some of this other really dark charcoal that you saw me use before. That is actually more of like a pastel. It goes on really, really dark. And so you can see I'm just kind of filling in where the shadow is going to be. So this is a cast shadow. The idea is the light's coming in, and it's kind of coming from the top. Okay. And so then there we go. Again, it's the shadow that's being cast from the box. Okay, so then on the actual object itself, somewhere in here you'll have a core shadow. But basically, like, this is the side that's the most in, getting the least amount of light. And so there's some variations in here, but I'm just going to kind of block it in that way for now. And then this one, maybe I'll just go over it very lightly. So this side's kind of the second darkest side. And then, of course, the very top has, quite a bit of light hitting it, okay? And so what I can do then is, and I could wait a little bit later to do this, but I'm going to go ahead and pull like a little bit of light back out up here at the top. So I'm not pushing down that hard with the eraser, but I'm just doing that to give myself an idea that that top area is going to be much brighter. Okay, and so actually I'm going to go back over this with a second coat, and I'm going to use the one that's a little more of a pastel. And again, I'm not pushing down very hard, and if you notice, I'm not trying to give it a really crisp edge on the edge of the shadow. The shadows tend to actually be pretty fuzzy. Okay. And so really I should use a blending stump, like, something like this. Okay, but you're going to see me use my hands a lot. And the reason why you're supposed to use a blending stump is your hands, or, you could use like a piece of felt, you could use flannel, and you can use all kinds of stuff to blend with. You know, even a chamois will blend, but a chamois tends to pull the charcoal out of the paper, kind of lifts it, works almost like an eraser. But again, the reason you're not really supposed to use your hands is because your hands have oil on them, and then here I am doing it anyways. And so what ends up happening is that you kind of seal the material into the paper, and then if you need to erase, you can't really get it back out. But if your hands are pretty dry like mine, you won't have that happen as much. Okay, let's see. I'll make one little pass on this. Okay, and so again, I'm going to do is go ahead and kind of soften this stuff up. I probably could use this blending stem. Or maybe not. I feel like this one's working better. For what I need over here, I need it kind of smoother and softer. And if you notice when I'm blending, everything tends to get kind of lighter, which again is something that can happen when you're blending. You actually tend to lose a lot of the contrast. So there's a certain point where I always tell the students, you know, you sort of need to kind of quit blending so much. You need to let some of that, you know, sharpness or contrast that needs to be there come through. Okay, and if you blend with your hands like I'm doing now, even with the blending steps, kind of doing little circles like this, tends to put it on more even. Okay, and then you'll see some areas where sometimes I'll kind of pull the charcoal back in to get it to be a little more even and consistent. So of course I can use my eraser where I went over the line a bit. Okay, and I don't have my brush with me right now, but sometimes I tend to use the brush to kind of wipe some of the excess powder away. Yeah, let's say this is probably more the angle. Okay. So here, again, I don't really want a line. So what's going to end up happening is that I am, you know, I'm trying to make it an even tone or an even plane to where it, you know, like this stops and then that space behind it is the one that starts. And so that's why I say that you really don't want to have, you know, like hard lines necessarily. Okay. Okay. So one of the next things I'm going to do is, when I'm looking at the image that I put up, a lot of the negative space up here, I know that space behind the cube tends to be a little bit darker. So see, rather than have a line on that space, what I'm trying to do is just let all the negative space, all this negative, be what defines that positive shape there, you know, that shape from the cube. And again, I'm gonna kind of start blending like this. Even when you're blending, try not to push too hard. So you push down really hard on the paper, what ends up happening is that you really bury it into the fibers of the paper. And so if you need to erase, it's really hard to do that then. You know, I would say it's like, you know, getting dirt or mud or something on the carpet, and then you go back and stomp all over it. It's not going to be as easy to vacuum it back out. And so that's kind of how this works. Okay, so now that I have that, and I'm going to try to use one of the sharper edges of my eraser here to get the edge. This is where I can create, again, those like sharp edges, and not really that they're sharp, but edges that where it's a clear separation. You know, it's clearly light and then dark. See, there we go, it's getting there. Okay, so again, I'm trying to use the kind of the more squared off part of the eraser. Now if I go over a little bit, it's okay. I can always add charcoal back in. And then if I go past that, I can always erase again. And I'm just kind of blowing it so I don't smudge it again. And so again, I feel like maybe I went a little too far. I remember the idea is that there's not really a line, but it's okay to have a sharp edge to it. Because then if I get this, you know, whole space a little bit darker, then what ends up happening is that, again, it just creates a spot where it transitions from one to the next. Again, I still feel like this is a little, angle's a little weird, but that's okay. I'm gonna kind of mess with it just a little more. And so then what ends up happening is, like, again here, it's a little darker. And you're gonna find it's a lot of adjusting. So I tone this in and, you know, smudge it around, but now I'm deciding, no, it needs to be a little darker. And again, it kind of fades out, the light kind of fades here, so for now I'm just going to try to soften it up just a bit. Okay. And so then I think for the right here, I'm going to come in with a charcoal pencil just because I feel like some of this I can get, again, more of that crisp edge. And like I said, I don't really want a line. I just want that where it's one tone in this shape and then it switches to a different tone and of course a different tone here. Since this is a geometric shape, from this particular angle of the light, again, it's a little more of a hard edge. And again, I keep emphasizing that I'm not, you know, I'm not really trying to leave a line there. I'm just trying to get it to be where one of them ends and then the next one starts. So it's just two different shapes lined up against each other. And so down here on this cast shadow, and it's actually a bit more of an occlusion shadow. So this one can look a little more like a line. But it's just like two different shapes next to each other. That's what you'll find with a lot of these. Okay, and so And this side does have like a really thin little dark shadow going along the edge. So it almost does look like it has a line, but it's actually kind of not. It's more of a shadow. Okay, so there we go. Okay, so I'm gonna get the blend stamp, or actually not yet. I'm going to darken some of this up here. Because again, looking at it, here's more where the core of the shadow is. So again, it comes in, and so what ends up happening is the light hits, the object here, hits the brightest on the top, but it actually hits the table surface and bounces back. So you're gonna see some reflected light in here. So up here is gonna be a little darker than the bottom, which, when you first start taking a drawing class, it seems unusual, but again, it's because the light will bounce off of here and hit there, and so then this ends up being the area that has the least amount of light. So what I'm going to do is just darken some of this stuff up. So again, I'm just kind of trying to smooth it out first, but I'm going to have to come back in and probably nudge it just a little bit darker. And again, sort of towards the same thing, sort of the same thing at the bottom. Where the reflected light hits, it doesn't exactly hit on that bottom corner. So it's a little bit darker there. And again, the reflected light comes up and it hits in there, and then a whole bunch of that is a bit brighter. And so if I come in, use my blending stamp, because this one's a little softer. Some of these areas that I probably did get a little darker than I should have, I can pull back out just a bit. Same thing over here. Okay. And actually, I'm going to smooth this out just a hair too. Okay, so we're good there. And then again, looking at this image a little more closely, there's probably more light here than I am leaving. So I'm going to pull some of it back out. And it actually kind of goes up into this space. Yeah, it's probably a little brighter there, even up here. And there we go. And so I've kind of got some charcoal on my hands, but it's okay. I don't, this area doesn't need to be super bright. So I can kind of smudge and, blend some of that back out. And then some of this, again, I'm just going to kind of soften it. So I don't think it needs to be super black, it doesn't need to be black. It just needs to be darker. And there we go. That's good. Okay, so this area, I'm just going to kind of smooth this out. Actually, maybe we'll come back in, just do one more little pass to give it a little tone. said, I'm just kind of blending it out. I'm sorry, I know I'm shaking the camera. And I think I'm gonna bring this just over here. I know I'm sort of wiping out some of the stuff I had on here before, but that's okay. There we go. And then it's going to end up happening is, since there's more light on the table, basically directly. And this part of the shadow, it's a little blurry on the edge, but it's not super crisp. And here, I'm going to pull a bit of light out of there. This corner more squared off, and then I use my more rounded part of the eraser here. And yeah, there's quite a bit of light towards the bottom, so I'm gonna go ahead and pull most of this back out. And really, I just want to try to get this to be like an even tone. It doesn't really need to be super white. And over here, it kind of fades in, so I just don't push as hard with the eraser. I'm going to kind of erase the other direction because I can see all those lines. And it's not as smooth as I'd like, but I don't have a chamois with me today, so I can't really... I probably would have used that to pull a lot of this tone back out, to be honest. Okay. Yeah, maybe a little bit more there. And so I'm just kind of doing this just to soften it out just a bit more. I'm just using a paper towel. And some of this. And grab some of that and use that to blend. And there we go. I'd say that's pretty close. There's some other things I keep softening up. Actually, there's one little thing I'll do. There's like a thin occlusion shadow here, and this will help me kind of even this little edge out. So yeah, just where the box is just barely not touching the surface. There's a little tiny gap. There's like a little one right there that we can kind of squeeze in there. But that's pretty much it to drawing that one.